My dad was a carpenter by trade, and he used to build boats. They should do boat building also. And my mom was a housewife. We grew up in Claywood. We're a family of siblings, were 5 children. My brother, Mr. Rajbansi, he was the second child. We were 5 children, and my dad was the only one that was working in our house. And we had such a good living. We never were short of anything. We lived so nicely at that time, you know. I'm talking about years back, you know. Yeah, we were a very close-knit family. We were a happy family. Nobody raised their voice in our house. Only when the boss grew big, then he should raise his voice to roar like the tiger.
Claywood, incidentally, was called Chota India. Chota India means small India. It was one of the most densely populated Indian areas. Outside India, it was the most densely populated. We had 40,000 people. I'm now talking about in the early 50s. And so Raj and I grew up from there, and we grew up together, and we have had a history because our life spanned not only as friends on the street playing ball and whatnot else, really. We also had been to the same high school, and thereafter we got into local politics, and then we got into parliament, and we got into provincial parliament.
I don't know if you'll believe, but he was a quiet one. My elder brother was a bit noisy, and he was a quiet one. That time we didn't even know what politics was, you know. And everyone that came and knocked at our door, they asked for the name Rajbansi. Then we tell them, no, we think about my dad, no, he's gone to work. They say, no, not that the young one. I say, why? People coming and looking at, like for him, you know, he just goes to school.
Mr. Rajbansi stayed in Claywood proper, Dayal Road. I was more in Jacobs, bordering Claywood. We served in the early days on the executive of the Italian Youth Congress. And we were then meeting the names that you hear today, you know, Monty Naika. He was, during the treason trial, we used to meet late at night in outside Claywood sometime because we had to be away from the special branch, because special branch were always following all the work that we were involved in.
Oh, he was very, very good in terms of the fact that he knew where he was going, and he had a passion for sports in particular, and particularly when we as youngsters, that's what we loved, was sports. And so Raj and I interacted at that particular level.
I don't know how my dad came to know while talking to people. My dad should tell him, one day you're going to go to Robben Island. We thought, what was Robben Island now? Well, my dad tells him that because my dad came to know about this politics, who he's going to talk, who he's meeting, and people tell my dad that, you know.
But as far as the Indian community is concerned, and I will say that prior to the past 15 or 20 years ago, for reasons which we are quite familiar with, the Indian community was the pointed nose of the cone as far as the so-called liberation struggle, or the struggle for freedom, or the struggle for justice and righteousness in this country. And one must admit that in the past 15 or 20 years we had lagged behind to such an extent that we are trailing behind others, the Africans and the Colours, as far as political activity, as far as the galvanization of the masses are concerned.
3rd February 1960, Macmillan was the Prime Minister of the British Empire, and he was here on a visit to South Africa. And when he was coming from the airport, all the people lined up to welcome. And this is where Mr. Rajbansi decided that he must not just see one side of what the country is. From a political point of view, he must see, the apartheid side of it, where Indians were kept isolated from all the good areas and the facilities the municipalities were providing for them. And this is where he put that poster on one of the cars. If I'm not mistaken, it was the main car that the Prime Minister was sitting on, apartheid South Africa.
On the one hand, you have the Labour Party, which is a powerful political force in the coloured community. Or shall I say that the coloured community itself is politicized and activated, more active than the Indian community. And near at home we have Inkatha, which is, I would describe, the most powerful black political movement in the history of South Africa, even outclassing the popular African National Congress.
We had a tuck shop at school, and we were told that we got to support the tuck shop. But there were people selling identical products outside the school fence, and we decided to go and support them. And they took a decision stating that, no, you can't do that. You'll have to support the school. And we said, no, you can't tell us what to do. And we will support them. And I think that is where we fought against them. And but I think that led us, and that we became tremendous leaders, and we were respected amongst our fellow students at that time, and that is how we became top leaders at school.
I was living in Chatsworth, about 8 doors away from his house, and we became very close friends before he entered politics in the local LAC. We became friends because at that time I was a teacher at Maryland Secondary School, and he was someone who was very passionate about education, and also I was very culturally involved at that time in Chatsworth, and that was also his passion. And I was also deeply involved in the Hindu Dharma Sabha, religion, and he was a very, very deeply religious man, with a very profound knowledge of Hinduism, and he was a great Hanuman Bhakt. We went on, and he became a popular person because of his very nature, very friendly. People took to him very easily, and because he was also very simple. He started, he gained lots and lots of friends. He was involved in soccer. He was a referee, and he knew all the soccer clubs and all the players, and they all were his friends. And the remarkable thing about Rajbansi before he entered politics was the fact that he welcomed everyone into his home. If people had problems, he used to actually help people with a problem long before he became a politician. So he was a true servant of the people. They'll come to him with simple problems, and he'll welcome them into his house, and he'll make them sit, make them comfortable, and he'll talk to them. And he became a go-to person when people had problems. And at that time, Chatsworth was in its genesis, and people who had been removed by the Group Area Act went to Chatsworth, and there were lots of problems, there were lots of challenges. Many people were poor, and some of them didn't even have groceries at home, but he'll buy with his own money. He was involved with the milk board. He'll buy things and so on for them, take care of them.
He was an art teacher, He was an art teacher, and he used to have a freehand drawing, freehand. Like if you're sitting in front of him, he could just draw your face as you are, freely. And he was doing that all the time at home, but we didn't know what he was doing. One time he just took a piece of wood and he carved a pattern on the wood on his own. We thought, what he's up to, whole day he's busy. And then he had a sari material, you know, like a sari. He put that on the table and he just dipped that plank onto the paint and he was dabbing that on the material and he made a border. And it ended up like a sari. We thought, wow, what was that? You see, he was an art teacher. And then he won the Rembrandt bursary and went to Salisbury Island. The art bursary he won. And then he came back, then he was teaching Clewood High. From there, he started moving away a little bit because he was getting interested in politics and nobody knew.
In his matric year, he won the Rembrandt art competition. They gave him prize money, which was in the form of a bursary. With that bursary, he was able to go to Salisbury College and start a career in teaching. He wanted to be a lawyer, but his parents couldn't afford those kinds of fees. And also, Rembrandt gave him a coin. His art was displayed in many places, even at the old UDW. And he had made a mask, apart from so many other art work that he had done during his schooling.
He was one of those top artists at that time. I remember, I think he won the Jan Hofmeyr speech contest. He won the art competition at that time. And both he and I became debaters at the school, and we were top debaters. So, yeah, so that's basically what he used to be involved in.
In his youth, he was a very fiery debater. He took part in debates and speech contests. There was one well-known debater. He used to take part in the Indian parliamentary session. They created one for the whites, so we had one for the Indians. And Mr. Rajbansi took part and he beat Durek Bihari, was known to be the orator of that time.
Rajbansi, I met him many years ago. I first met him at Curry's Fountain when he was a referee, a soccer match. And then we became friends, and then he started promoting wrestling. So I also helped him to promote wrestling. And as the years went by, when he became the head of the department, and I opened up a senior citizens organization. And he became very instrumental in being a part of my organization and being a part of me.
Rajbansi used to be a referee, football referee. And I used to play football. We used to play at the Chatsworth Stadium and he used to be a referee. And I knew growing up, he lived in Clewood and I was a little kid and he used to walk past. Everyone walked in those days. Nobody. So you knew everyone who walked. And there was this really big man. He didn't have a wig at that time. He was balding. And everyone used to say, there's a referee going.
Okay, I played for Saints, right? And Mr. Bansi was involved with Bluff Rangers. He was an administrator. But he was a very good administrator, I'll tell you why. I'd like to tell you the story. In the 1968 Clover Cup, we were the first winners of that cup. We were supposed to play Dimes United. They beat Bluff Rangers. But Bluff Rangers protested the game because Dimes had an illegal player. And who fought the case? Rajbansi. And they won it. They won the case and we finished off playing Bluff Rangers. And we beat them 5-3. We were young guys.
Oh, he was a very stern referee. Eh? And he was never ever afraid of the crowd. You know, at that time, the ruling party was the Maxine Barracks. You know, when that crowd came there, you know, they were uncontrollable. But Mr. Rajbansi stood on his decision. He was very strong.
His communication with the guys, although he was with Bluff Rangers, but like I said, with the school's football, he communicated with each unit, with the coaches that coached the children. So then he asked me personally, but I was the one instrumental in that. Are you sure all these kids came for training for the 8 weeks? And I showed him all the documents from Unit 1 to Unit 11. Those are the only kids who can play in the tournament.
He had the build of a wrestler. And in case it is not known, Mr. Rajbansi, besides loving wrestling, was also a soccer referee, right? And that's when I also remember him from. Prior to meeting him in the early 70s, when he was with the milk, when he was promoting his milk carnival, he was there. He was a figure that you could not ignore, whether you loved him or hated him. He was there in full cry.
Oh, he was a wrestling fan. He loved wrestling. And he would take wrestling and horse racing. I learnt about wrestling and I learnt about horse racing from Mr. Rajbansi. It was actually the July handicap became a highlight of my wife and I's events in the year because Mr. Rajbansi made it so special. I recall one time we went to, it was Tiger Singh that was in wrestling in Westridge Park. And so Mr. Rajbansi would tell me, he'd say, they just put an act there. They're all good actors. And he said, you watch this. So Tiger Singh got a shot from in that, the ring. And he fell out and he came right in front of Asha Rajbansi. Asha was sitting there and he opened his mouth like this. And Asha she had a Coke or something in her hand and she poured the Coke in his mouth. He drank the Coke and he winked at her and he woke up and he was back in the ring and they were fighting. So that was one of those. The other was our horse racing meetings, going to Greyville Racecourse. He would prepare for weeks and he'd give me my little badge to put the badge on and he'd tell me, keep that thing safe, take me in, we'll have our seats there, we'll spend the day at the races.
Chatsworth is no more in sports, no more in soccer like what it used to be. Because he is actually promoted, not only Bluff Rangers, sports as a whole.
From the time in Cleveland, we moved to Amichand Rajbansi, Chatsworth. Mr. Rajbansi's family also moved in 1970. We moved in 1971. He organized the massive Chatsworth Milk Carnival. At that point in time, he was the PRO of the Durban Milk Publicity Association.
The Milk Carnival was a community cohesion event because people had come from different areas to Chatsworth, right? That as a result of the Groupers Act, people came from Riverside, from Mayville, from Pinetown, all over the place. So this was one event that was to bring the people together, to get to know each other, and to become good neighbors. That was the main aim. The second aim was to promote our culture, to keep our culture alive. Because when people moved to Chatsworth, they had cultural events in their own areas, like you take the Riverside Dancing Company and so on. They should have tents and should have events and so on in their own areas. But when they came to Chatsworth, there were no resources. There were no halls, there were no temples, no mosques, nothing. So he tried to bring, Mr. Rajbansi tried to bring all those, events that the community loved, and that was able to gather the people together to one event. And that was a miraculous formula. And from the Milk Carnival, as people went home, they met people there, they started talking, they became friends. And that gave rise. The Milk Carnival actually inspired lots of community-based organizations. I can tell you a lot about the Milk Carnival, but I want to state the fact. There was a magazine called Huisgenoot, Afrikaans magazine, and they heard about the Milk Carnival. And they actually came one day and they counted the number of people. And at one venue, 3 big grounds, on one day, we had the Milk Carnival on the Sunday, 1st Sunday of July. We were able to attract 75,000 people. Now, Today, with all the resources, the radio stations, and the community newspapers, there's no event to match that. That was the mastermind. The Rajbansi was actually organizing things. He was an astute organizer. And to manage an event as huge as that, and the participants, we had like over 200 participants. It was not easy, but he had the capacity, unparalleled in my opinion, to organize this in such a way that there was no glitch.
Now, the Milk Carnival was something that Mr. Rajbansi had actually initiated in Chatsworth. It was a major annual event. Mr. Rajbansi was working, I think, for Clover at the time. So he had this thing called the Milk Carnival. And these were things that people still talk about even until today. They still remember the impact of the Milk Carnival.
It was about political choices. I mean, I'm of a generation where we made very specific choices that we would contest the apartheid regime. We didn't see spaces in which one could operate or collaborate. He, on the other hand, and there's a whole generation of his who believed that you didn't need to necessarily be confrontational and that you could work within the system and change that system. I mean, I remain skeptical whether that was at all possible. But what he did was that he masterfully extracted benefits. And I don't think that he was necessarily self-serving. I think he cared deeply about the community from within which he came. And that's reflected in the kind of work he did. I think he's unmatched in terms of the different kinds of creative ideas that he put on the table to mobilize people. I think of, for instance, the Milk Carnival in Chatsworth. And I was a child during that time. But to mobilize literally thousands of people, bring people out onto the streets and into the stadiums the way he did, I think is remarkable. And I would hesitate to say, or I won't hesitate to say that that kind of mobilization is unmatched to bring people out in those kinds of numbers. When I think of the M. Padwatan School in Chatsworth, I mean, that school celebrates the legacy of the heroes of the 1917 floods on the Mgeni River. And had it not been for Mr. Rajbansi, their memory might have been lost altogether. But he campaigned and he changed the name of a school so that that legacy will live for 100 or more years to come.
So, ladies and gentlemen, political parties can only be established bearing in mind that it must have a role to play. You have in the white community the CP, the PFP, the Nationalist Party and the NRP. The parties exist because the parties have something to look forward to.
The first election that he fought in Clearwood, I remember, a long time ago, it was LAC. And he won that election. And the senior people in that they were so angry because he was the youngest there. How can he win an LAC election in Clearwood? That's the day he took my dad. And my dad, from that day, he was like proud of him. He was going every meetings.
I don't know whether Mr. Pandey want to say anything or whether we'll find out what your promises from tomorrow.
Mr. Minister, Mrs. Rajbansi, ladies and gentlemen, you know, the Rajbansi name is a very big name. It has become such that it is something that remains steadfast in one's mind. And no matter what the evil in our societies have done and tried, nothing is able to push these people down. But I have my association with Minister Rajbansi in particular from childhood. We have been at school together.
Come 1975, and at that time he came to me and he says, hey, Kamal, I think what we should really do you should join local government. And that's how he and I got into local government. And then but first, both he and I discussed one very important issue. Are we selling the Indian community or not? Are we doing anyone down? Is there anything that we can go over there, and do you think we'll be able to make some valuable contribution? And the answer was yes.
For too long, our community has been represented by self-appointed leaders from the petty bourgeois, and this is usually the case in similar situations in this universe in the past 100 years. The political scientists can confirm that. Who will, for their own selfish motives, have a habit of objecting anything that involves the masses, opposing elections, etc., knowing full well that if they do not sabotage such projects, then the leadership will be at stake and they will be knocked into oblivion. It was not my intention to deal with this topic today, but I feel that it is necessary for me to mention something about these soda water politicians, as they have printed 100,000 handbills, taken 6.5 pages of advertisements in the newspaper, printed car stickers, lapels, posters with one slogan, stop this man Rajbansi.
Well, I think it was basically fighting for some form of recognition, right? And although at that time, one of the avenues that was open was in fact the TRICAM. And as much as it was despised, again, I go back to the fact that there had to be an avenue that had to be used and exploited, if necessary, to gain whatever little gains one could achieve out of a system that admittedly was pernicious, but which provided some form of entry into what one hoped to ultimately achieve.
So let us leave today, let us depart today with one message to the community. Wherever we can go, I don't think you must unite under the SAIC. Minister de Klerk will confirm that the SAIC is a temporary body.
The white man, when they formed these LACs and the various political parties, when it came to parliament itself, like the House of Delegates, etc., really, they were possibly under the impression that we are going to get Indians over there who are just going to be quiet, listen to us and whatever we say. And I think that is where the rude shock came in. Because when we stood up against them and when we fought with, against whatever they stood for, and that is what they possibly must have thought to themselves, listen, we are the ones that started this nonsense, so we are giving Indians some power. And I think that is where Raj and I stand out.
We all agree that Minister de Klerk is going to play a very leading role in this development in the years to come. And we are grateful that we have him. For that reason, Mr. Rajbansi, I think you and your Indian Council and the Executive Committee of your Council and the Indian people are really privileged and fortunate in being so closely associated with the department.
The organizations that fought for the Indian community at the time were not too many. But among those that stand out is the National Indian Congress. It's a great pity, in my view, that the Congress movement had to fold, because they had within their midst some of this country's most intelligent leadership. They were able to sift the wheat from the chaff. They were able to do things, but from outside the parameters from where it mattered most. But that was a voice nonetheless. So in the absence of direct representation, I think bodies like the Minority Front and others chose to use the avenues that were open to them. Again, I'm saying it's a great pity that the Congress movement, which boasted many erstwhile political figures, had to fold.
Vice President Mr. Shibush opened the first session of the 4th South African Indian Council in Durban today. In his address, he praised the members of the Indian community who had accepted invitations to serve on the President's Council, which was aimed at peaceful coexistence for everyone in South Africa. The chairman of the South African Indian Council, Mr. A. Rajbansi, said all South Africans should realize the importance of fostering good relations with the new American administration of President Reagan.
He has recognized officially the reforms that are taking place within the boundaries of South Africa. And I think that is sufficient to give us who believe in dialogue, who believe in a peaceful solution to our problems, sufficient strength to carry on with the type of activities we are engaging upon. But I want to mention a word of warning or a word of counsel or caution. Let South Africa not be the cause of changing the attitude of President Reagan. If we fail, if the South African Indian Council and if its efforts fail, if the President's Council and its efforts fail, then I can say that peace, prosperity, security, stability in South Africa has failed. And in the words of a very important South African leader, if your council fails, Mr. Vice State President, then the catastrophe in Zimbabwe, in the words of this black leader, may look like a Sunday school picnic.
I was very aware of him through the SAIC, the work they did on the South African Indian Congress in those days. My dad was a school teacher, so he made it his job to keep us aware of what was happening around us. But perhaps far more aware of him, like I say, in the early 80s, especially in 83, 84, when in the lead up to the House of Delegates elections, the first elections. And I must say, it's an interesting story, because when I started out, I was vehemently opposed to the idea of the House of Delegates. And I was young, I was 17 years old. The whole idea of solidarity with the rest of the country. And in my world, in my perception, it looked like it was something that was antithetical to the idea of democracy.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you know, for us in particular, the South African Indian Council, this has been a very significant week in that we took a test case to court against the anti-SAIC forces, and we came out with flying colors.
Pre-1994, I belonged to a party called Solidarity, which was led by late Dr. Reddy, and he was a leader of the National People's Party at that time. And I was also a member of Parliament from 1989 to 1994 in the TRICAM system. Although it's a system I didn't recognize and a few of my colleagues didn't recognize as a means to an end. But we used it. We used the TRICAM system to try and get the best and to also try and defeat apartheid from within. And I'm glad that we've had the opportunity, you know, as young people at that time, to tell President de Klerk and other ministers of the National Party where to actually get off. And there were times when we didn't even support legislation that they were tabling, which legislation required consent from all three houses, the House of Delegates, House of Assembly, and the National Assembly, which was the House of Assembly, the Colored House, the Indian House, and the White House, so-called at that time. But Mr. Rajbansi, I think for a while, he went along with what they were saying, and we were the rabble-rousers there in Parliament. But eventually, I think he also realized, and even though Solidarity and National People Party were vying for power in what was called the Ministers' Council, and you know, he respected the fact that we had different views, but we had the same objective. And I think, you know, with having different views and with sharing those views, it didn't mean that we were enemies, but we differed politically. But at the end of the day, we realized what our aim and objective was.
I boasted before the election that as a result of us using the LAC platform, we can prove to the community that we were able to save the people of Chatsworth 56 million rand over 30 years as part of the finalization of the process of Chatsworth homes. It's evident. It can be proved. We were able, over a period of 18-month struggle, to waive the market value and bring the prices down to 1,800 rand.
You know, the strangest thing is that, I mean, I belong to the era of 1984 when we were protesting in Matric against the tricameral parliament, etc. And Mr. Rajbansi was in leader of the National People's Party, etc. So I was like, no, this man, he's not doing the thing. Country is changing, and he's only looking after a small population or something of that sort. That's being selfish. I held that view for a while. And then I met Rajbansi. I mean, I've listened to him speak when he was in the legislature, etc., when I went for every meetings or something. This time I wasn't part of his office. And then I got to know Mr. Rajbansi. I mean, you can't get to know Mr. Rajbansi just by listening to him talk, etc., or listening to him give an interview. You get to know him because of the time you spend with him. And then I got to know so many different things. Like, one of the greatest things that people misunderstand when they think he only worried about Indians, it wasn't true. And the biggest thing was that I'm a teacher by profession. In 1989, I started teaching, and we were earning 1,700 rands a month after 4-year qualification. And de Klerk had decided then to give a 22% increase to bring everyone onto parity. That means so the Indians and the coloreds would get 22% to match what the whites already had as teachers. And at that time, Rajbansi had not supported that. And then it was only because of him that the black teachers also received parity in that February or some March of that year, 89 or 90. And people don't realize that. He didn't say, no, my Indians are fine, I accept it. He said, no, but what's the difference between the black guy who's doing the same job and has the same qualification? And that's how blacks in the country got parity in terms of teaching. The other thing is that, okay, I think most people may know this, but he was the first person to open our schools to other races. Of course, you could be white, you could come, but obviously no one would want to move from their privileged white education to an Indian school, but he opened them to blacks and coloreds. And that's where, and he was not given money for running it, that's in House of Delegates, etc. He was not given money because you only got paid in the school according to the number of Indian people that were there, because each school was demarcated, colored, black, Indian. So at what we would say would be, at maybe the risk of us not getting such a good education, he still took in black pupils. He was the first to do it, and he did those things. Those were things that you never understood. People never knew. People will not know that you'd go in a car, Mr. Raj, once we were driving in the car, and you'll stop and you'll see a group of people playing soccer on the field. I remember Cater Manor, even Groutville, etc. And he'd say, like, I don't know why we didn't bring some kits, etc. But he'll stop there, find out who they are, talk to them, and leave after giving them his personal money, maybe 1,000, 2,000 rand. Please use this to develop yourselves. He was different. He was like, you see the government, they say, you heard what they said, we must introduce triple BEE and all they say. But here, please make sure that everyone gets a chance. I want blacks, Indians, whites, colored to all be part of the procurement process. They must all be given an opportunity. He was different.
Mr. Minister, this South African Indian Council, which is the 5th statutory council, has always adopted an open door policy, ever willing to arrange meetings with ministers and officials of the various state departments. We have surely not allowed our body to have the sole right to meet cabinet ministers, director generals, and other officials of the state departments. So today's get-together with the Honourable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, the Administrator of Natal and the heads of the various departments is evidence of the non-monopolistic approach of the present South African Indian Council.
The tricameral system was invented or initiated by the National Party government. What it wanted to do was to cut up South Africa into little pieces or little pockets of countries that were independent in their own way. you got Transkei, Venda, Botswana, all of them had independent governments. And so the Coloureds had the House of Representatives. The Indians had the House of Delegates. And as a result of that, pocketing each community or each language group into their own governments so they could rule South Africa as a whole. The House of Delegates was a puppet system, but it was a small price for the National Party to pay in order to have overall control. So I would say to the House of Delegates and its leadership, whoever was there at the time, because they fought like cats and dogs in order to run that house between the National People's Party and Rajbansi, and I think it was JAIDEV in the Solidarity Party. They fought each other. That didn't help, because what it did is it polarized the Indian community into Tamil-speaking or South Indian and Hindi-speaking North Indian. It really did. It took a long time to bridge that gap.
The occasion is an historic one, as this is the first regional type school hall of the Department of Education and Culture in the administration of the House of Delegates to be completed.
There were mixed feelings. Like in anything during that time, there were the orthodox people who were not prepared to fight the system. So, no. Tricameral was something that Mr. Rajbansi really went into, and his philosophy was we get an opportunity to open the door, and we get in and fight the system. Favorite quotation, get in and fight the system. From outside, you got no chance. And this is why he went into the Tricameral.
Our answers to our critical lies in a very good dictum that the proof of our pudding must be in the eating.
Look, Mr. Rajbansi became a powerful figure because he represented much of the Indian community. Now, you would have heard that the House of Delegates was a sellout because they went in for multi-party talks with the government while the African majority didn't have votes. It's not as simple as that. The African majority had homelands. They were far better off. They had universities, they had schools, they had everything they wanted because they were the majority, like they do now. When he became so powerful, other persons who were challenged and threatened by his power, and he became very powerful. I mean, he was the Bengal Tiger, you know. Becoming threatened the way they were, they decided to find ways to attack and undermine his integrity and character. And this happens in politics. Whether it's America, England, or South Africa, even now, with Jacob Zuma, Cyril Ramaphosa, Ace Magashule, it's the dirty world of politics. But you judge a man on merit, on the facts, and what did he achieve? Look at the schools, look at the halls, look at the roads, look at the houses he built. There's been nothing of that sort since he's passed on. And that's the greatest loss for us.
That the future of our youth in this country lies in training them to satisfy South Africa's manpower needs.
We used to go for the jugular when it came to the tricameral system. We wanted a democratic South Africa, okay? But when you look at it 35 years later, we were better off under those guys than we were under the ANC government right now. They did more for the community, even though they were getting a cut out of it, but they did more.
You know, I believe that the success of any community, I always argue that we must not worry too much about whether we have Indian education or non-racial education. A lot of people are talking through. We had silent marches about the so-called quota system. But before the government brought in any legislation about quota system, we didn't have any quotas as far as admissions are concerned. And the pioneers of these institutions had their own quotas themselves without any laws forcing them to have any quotas.
Rajbansi was doing a lot of good things, you know, and then when the House of Delegates started, they got a lot of power, and he started manipulating things to make a profit out of it, like giving people garage licenses, business licenses, and he was getting a cut out of it. So in those days, that was the corruption which now is like peanuts. There were lots of positive, but we didn't appreciate what was positive because we wanted a better South Africa. We had a blueprint for a non-racial South Africa. The Indians and colours living in the Casbah and Clowood, Ketamana, had an amazing relationship.
And people must not forget the fact that even during his term as House of Delegates, as much as we criticize it, he did a lot for the Indian community. If you look at the schools, the community halls, the roads, he fought for the Indian community, and he did make a major contribution, which can never be denied. Because if you look at the hospitals also that's been built and various other clinics, he was very instrumental in getting that done. And, you know, he was focused. I remember once I was in a hall in somewhere in Lenasia, and the community said, oh no, it was him. They made a request to him and he got it built. So he made a great contribution to the upliftment, especially for the Indian community in South Africa. He was a person that I believe that was well liked by his supporters. He formed his own successful political party. And despite our political difference, we spoke, we respected each other. He respected you for your views. He would defer with you, but he will not demean you.
Much of what we have today, let me just use two towns as an example, Phoenix and Chatsworth, is as a result of what they had done then in the House of Delegates. We're not in agreement with that separatist policies of having a parliament for each different ethnic group in this country. But what he did was provide us with a lot of schools. The schools that you see in Phoenix, Chatsworth, Verulam, Tongaat, and other areas is as a direct intervention by the House of Delegates.
Ladies and gentlemen, to fit in with the International Year of the Youth, the House of Delegates of Parliament has decided to present today the role of the youth in not only the preservation of Indian culture, but also in respect of enlarging upon it in the most critical years that lie ahead of us. We are of the firm belief that...
And I regard it my privilege to follow Professor Kuvaria. He is noted for its heart transplant. And we also recognize the fact that it'll be a very grave mistake if we select the wrong heart in order to put into this body.
Remember that, I remember there was a debate about how we're going to set up this transition from the apartheid government to a democratic process. That took a lot of efforts from all the political parties in the country, because there you have to give and take. The ANC wanted this, the IFP wanted this. You remember in '93, the IFP didn't want to contest the elections. They boycotted the elections, and their lives were lost during that process. And having to convince them to join the CODESA negotiations was not an easy one.
When the crunch came, Mr. Rajbansi's role became critical because he gravitated more and more and more towards where Mandela was. And that sort of became his guide, that if there's a conflict, he will side with where Mandela was, meaning he will side with the liberation movement.
That unless this dualism is solved, the essential problem will remain that we will have a party or an organization or whatever they prefer to call themselves, that we will have a party with a pen in the one hand and claiming the right to still have arms in the other hand.
The Constitution needed to be presented to the world. The media was waiting. By 10 a.m., Madiba was going to present the Constitution. So this was the night before. What happened was that there was a deadlock in the Constitution. And Madiba was really worried. He didn't know what to do, because if the deadlock continued throughout the night, he wouldn't have a constitution to produce to the media that was already waiting, for the constitution to be produced the next morning. So at 3 a.m., he called in Mr. Rajbansi to his office and explained that, this is the issue, what are we going to do, and how can you help to break this deadlock? So Mr. Rajbansi understood the Nats, he understood what the problem was, and he understood how to negotiate with them. He then went about negotiating, and by the morning, he came back to Madiba and said that everything was sorted. He will have a constitution to produce to the world by 10 a.m. that morning. Everyone was happy, and that's how the constitution got, done.
The skills that Raj had, remember that most of the ANC leaders were coming from exile. They never had an opportunity to run a government. So some of the details were missed out by the ANC there, because how I came to know, as a leader of COSATU KZN, we picked up loopholes that happened during the CODESA negotiations and areas that were not attended to. I'll give you an example. When the ANC went for negotiations, they did not even think about the local government structure, the municipality structure. They spoke about the provincial government and the national government. Later on, there was an issue about the local government because the IFP was harping on the issue of the local government. And that is why today we're sitting with a crisis, because it was never a priority. You recall that even the date of the local government election was different. It was not synchronized to the general elections, because during negotiations, the local government election was not taken as a priority, and the municipality. As a result of that, we ended up building so many municipalities that are dysfunctional as we are speaking.
I think we should regard CODESA as the process and not something that should be accomplished in a couple of hours. Because we want all people who attach their signature to the declaration to do so because they have the conviction that that document mirrors their ideas as well.
You will remember that prior to CODESA, Nelson Mandela was involved with negotiations with the National Intelligence Agency. And the person in charge then was Dr. Neil Barnard, who negotiated with Mandela when he was still in prison and prepared him for his release. And that is where the problems arose, because at those meetings, which is recorded in Dr. Neil Barnard's book, he mentioned that they agreed then to the quota system, which gave Indians the 2% quota that we currently have, which essentially means Indians get 2 out of every 100 jobs. Despite the fact there may be 100 doctors, 100 lawyers, or 100 engineers, the quota system for this country is 2%, and only 2 Indians will get jobs out of 100. Now, you come to CODESA, you will remember that the right-wingers drove a armored vehicle into CODESA and broke down they drove through the glass windows, depending on how old you are. And when they entered, it was radical AWB, and it was the Afrikaner Weerstand Beweging, who rushed in, and everybody fled. And Mr. Rajbansi, true to himself, he never stood back. So he walked in to go and retrieve a very expensive pen of his. You may have heard the story, and he was physically attacked by these white right-wingers. And he never stood back and he never bowed down. So for me, that was the only person at CODESA who stood up to these angry white right-wingers, and hats off to him.
There are many in this country who have waited very, very patiently, did not rush, so that by the finding or the selection of the right heart, this particular body can survive for a very, very long time.
The tension was very high because it was outrageous, really outrageous that you can have the AWP coming in from outside and smash their Land Rover, whatever it was, into that. I mean, they were spitting on the people of South Africa, really. And Mr. Rajbansi was one of the targets because to them he had sold out. But to be regarded by the AWP as a sellout is actually a crown on your head, because if you are selling out the AWP, you are selling out racism, you are selling out apartheid, you are selling out apartheid, and then you are on the right side of history.
Terre Blanche came through with a whole group of commandos and actually, drove through a large window in that building called the World Trade Center. And we were all asked to move into different rooms by security. And while we were in the room, Mr. Rajbansi was there and I was there and we were all chatting. And he said, now let me try and go and talk to Mr. Terre Blanche and say, stop this. And he bravely did so against the wishes of the security personnel. But Terre Blanche, being the violent person that he was, reacted violently on Mr. Rajbansi. But I thought it was very brave of him to have done that. And when he came back, and I think one of the things about Mr. Rajbansi that I will not forget is that for him, any publicity was good publicity. And when he came back to us, and a few days later, he said, tell me guys, have any of you been on CNN or Sky News? He said, well, I've been on those channels. So he used every opportunity to get his message across, whether it was a good message or a bad message. And I think that's what a leader requires. A leader requires, to be able to communicate at grassroots level and at the highest level to put his point of view across. And that's what Mr. Rajbansi did very well.
I want to deal very, very briefly with the question of minorities in this country. And I want to make it very, very clear, and without any shadow of doubt whatsoever, that we are not proposing, in that commonly used phrase, meaningful participation for political minorities as an entrenchment of an ethnicity. When we refer to political minorities, we are not defining any minorities in this country on an ethnic basis. And I want to make it very, very clear today that in as much as we are non-aligned, we are supporting very, very strongly the principle of federalism and the principle of strong regional governments.
He was there to help more the minority. He was more into the minority because he feels those are the people. You see what happened? When we were affected in Claywood, we had to sell our place. That's when he started with the housing, And he lived, and he always said that he is there for the people, and he lived in Chatsworth, and do you know he lived in a council house? Till the end, he could have moved, but he didn't. He lived in a council house.
With the Group Areas Act, it created enclaves of different races, and thus Indian community lived together, irrespective of your income level as well. You could very easily be the son of a manual laborer living next door to a doctor. It was just the way it was. And everybody had a shared interest, a common interest. And I guess nothing focuses your mind as much as having a common enemy, which in those days was apartheid. And I think that helped us a lot.
When I used to chat with him personally, he had a vision what was going to happen. He knew that this country was going to go downhill. He said from day one that the country has been given to the wrong hands. And what the ruling party supposed to have done, they didn't do. They didn't. And that was the reason why you find that some people didn't like him, because he had a vision what was going to happen in 5 years. He had a vision what was going to happen in 10 years. He exactly knew that this was what's going to happen in 30 years. There will be no South Africa.
I didn't think they would have a life in our politics. I really didn't think they would have a life continuing. I thought it was a short-term thing. But I'm not surprised, after having met the person, that he had the type of charisma that could draw people towards him. That is another charismatic leader that we had in our politics, and still do, in the form of Jacob Zuma. So Raj was that kind of a charismatic person. He could draw people to his functions. He did whatever was necessary to draw people. And then when he was on the podium, he could hold the audience in terms of what the message that he was delivering to them. And that was the mark of, or the measure of the man, that he could do that. He could speak on politics, he could speak on sports, he could speak on civic matters, and identify with those that he was speaking to.
Did you know that as a united force, you hold the sway of power in this province and in the councils? Only through the minority front you can have this power. You choose the minority front.
There was one reporter that did an article in the Daily News that said the minority front was a one-man, one typewriter, and the right-hand man, VISVIN Reddy party. So when we started the minority front, it was just the two of us. It was difficult times initially, but we had the right narrative at the time. It was necessary because the Indian community needed a voice. And there was no one better than Mr. Rajbansi to have played that role to articulate the concerns of the Indian minority community. You understand this, that while the ANC had claimed that it had represented all race groups in the country, for some reason or the other, the Indian community in South Africa was being neglected.
The Minority Front is very, very proud of playing its role in the drafting of the constitution of this country, its role in reshaping the future of this country. The choice which the Indian community has is either you support white ganging up against a broad mass of the African people, or invest in the future of our country, in the future of our children, in the future of our grandchildren.
We want to move forward. So why don't we say MF, Minority Front, moving forward. My friend, my friendship, my family. He says it stands for so many things. He says, let's move forward with this, my family. I said, okay, it's good. So from there, we started driving around and recruiting members.
He didn't want to piggyback onto the big parties. He felt that the Indian voice will get diluted, and Indian people really needed their own voice in the corridors of power. So what he did was that he formed the Minority Front. Here again, he got a very dedicated group of men and women who joined him. And in 1993, the MF, the Minority Front, was born.
The MF is investing in the future of South Africans of Indian origin. We don't apologize for representing the concerns of the Indian majority. And that is why we must learn from our experiences and look at the mission and the long-term vision of the Minority Front.
We started the Minority Front in his lounge. We discussed it at great length. What was the need for the creation of a voice for the minority communities, the Indians in particular in South Africa. We were very disappointed in the first election in 1994 because we expected to get phenomenal support from the Indian community. Unfortunately, we didn't. We only secured, or the Minority Front secured only one seat in that year. And Mr. Rajbansi took up that seat in the KwaZulu-Natal Parliament. And although he was one seat there in Parliament, he made that voice heard throughout the corridors of this country, throughout the world. People could hear his voice. He was not somebody who would stay silent. He was somebody who spoke out against any form of discrimination, particularly encountered by the Indian community. And it's sadly missed today because you don't have that voice. And we were talking about it just the other day, my colleagues and I. Many Indian people in South Africa feel like foreigners here in the land of their birth. They don't really have an identity anymore because once again, they feel sandwiched, they're being isolated in the workplace, they're not being given opportunities. And if you look at what the ANC government is doing currently, it's very much the same that the apartheid government did.
My highlight was when he said in his election manifesto that he supports the minority rights movement and the equality movement for minority rights, specifically Indian, because that is what we had been staying for a long time, and that's how our paths converged.
Now, look, I was against a party to support the Indians. I just believe South Africa is all, you couldn't have a party just targeted with a new democracy being formed, and any party should really be embracing, not for only Indians. And look, being a staunch supporter of the ANC, we're obviously at political loggerheads. But he actually went ahead and won enough seats to be at the national parliament, to be at a provincial government. It means that people support him. Today, no matter what my views would have been, the fact that he had the support of the community and there were enough people to put him into parliament was a sign that people respected him and people thought he added value irrespective of our views. So that is something that I respect.
He saw people, he saw us as a rainbow nation, and the intention was to make sure that obviously you had to pick up people from grassroots level. Those were disadvantaged in the past. His intention was also to try and level the playing fields. But having said that, I know we had done a lot of research with the whatever happens in China. For example, there's a Chinese white paper, and the Chinese white paper is largely based on how you would manage representation for minority groups. So in that instance, I think that is where he played a commendable role, where the Indian community obviously is a minority group. And to the point that we were also marginalized, maybe not to the extent of the African communities, but nevertheless marginalized. So as it's not necessarily, to also pick up us in terms of disadvantaged status, but I think more also to try and nourish and nurture and keep the culture of the Indian community as well, because we're part of the Rainbow Nation. So I think that is what his intention was, to make sure that he had the minority front to safeguard the culture and the dynamics and the needs of that minority group.
Well, I think that those who are worried about South Africa, I think those who are worried politically about South Africa should look at the workings of ISKCON with a tremendous measure of positiveness, particularly from the point of view that ISKCON knows no barriers. ISKCON is universal. ISKCON knows no country, make no distinction between countries, no distinction between groups, and no distinction between nations. And if you look at the community that is at the ISKCON Center here, it is international. And I would also describe it as cosmopolitan. And this is what the international community wants. And if you have pilot projects in religious institutions like this in South Africa, it not only augurs well for this particular region, it also augurs well for the international community of nations.
When we had a meeting regarding why should we go for minority front prior to NPP, you see, NPP is going to be dissolved. Because if you look at the population of the people and which direction they were moving, right, obviously we're going to drop down. In understanding that, we said, okay, what will it be if we have to move a way forward in moving into a new party? You see, my idea is that we need to look at minorities of the country. People that have been isolated, were never involved in politics. They've been left out in the cold, right? While the National Party being the government of this country. And it was always looked upon to say, well, a white government has done this country very good, but priority was given to white people. Where were the Indians? Nowhere to be seen. Although the Indians played their role model in politics.
So he felt that with the minority front,
he will be able to answer the various problems of the Indian community. And I think that is where the Minority Front really succeeded and won a lot of people. And for those, you know, if ever you have a chance, or you may have had, if you discuss this with a lot of people, and particularly elderly people, and they will tell you that during the time of Rajbansi, we achieved a great deal in this country over here.
Well, he was a dyed-in-the-wool politician, for sure. I mean, this is somebody who lived and breathed politics. And I think that we must recognize that he saw political dynamics very differently from a lot of people of his generation. And I really wish that he'd lived a lot longer, because I wouldn't cast him as eccentric. He was certainly very entertaining. But I think that he is a man who believed in the welfare, particularly of his community, and he made no bones about that. He zeroed in on a particular community which had been historically neglected or marginalized. And I think that that neglect and marginalized is being exacerbated today because there isn't the kind of leadership to speak on behalf of that community. And he was very much the voice of that community. And I think of the slogans that he dreamt up in the time. I mean, he was a master at the quote, a dialer quote. And when I think of some of the lines that still stick in my mind, you know, he was unabashed about saying, for instance, and maybe this might not have been the right thing to say at the time, but for the purpose of political expediency, he said it. I mean, things like, we are here for the Charos, as a Minority Front program. He took the fight to people like Helen Ziller, and he said, bring that Helen Ziller to me and I'll have her dance on the tip of my little finger. There were other quotes like, we'll cross that bridge, or we'll double cross that bridge when we get to it. I think that he looked at the mood and he talked to that mood. I don't think that he was ever kind of racially focused in a way that was destructive, but he looked at the Indian community as the base from which he needed to work. And I think he did that with aplomb.
And I go back to what my grandpa had said, that you cannot win a boxing match from outside the ring. So there had to be an avenue. And the avenue that I think Mr. Rajbansi and his ilk chose at the time was the formation of the Minority Front. Okay, there were jokes as well about the usage of the name minority. And there was a play on words not too pleasant, but it was something that was born and is still going strong.
I mean, who can forget? Who actually can? That is a trademark. You see it anywhere. Even if somebody just does that to you, hey, who comes to mind? Mr. Rajbansi. That trademark of his will stay, and that statement didn't need words. It didn't, if he just did that. And he spoke volumes. It was like, Elizabeth, listen to me. I know what I'm saying. Speak to the hand kind of thing. So yes, as a political party, it was new. I mean, we never had like a whole lot of people. And here I must say that I'm not a very political person. I tend to stay apolitical, religious and kind of thing. But without sounding too political, I just say that there was this whole ripple that yes, there is somebody, there is a group that maybe while we have others, here's an option. And that was an option that he created.
Because my belief was that whoever of us wanted to get involved in politics, we needed to look at interests interests rather than communities, particular communities. Because if we started looking at the Indian community or the white community or the colored community, then we were going back pre-1994. We needed to think broadly. We needed to think that, well, we're now in a new dispensation, and we must look at an interest. If somebody has an interest in education, it doesn't have to be only the Indian person, but we must look at every individual in South Africa that had a particular interest, whether it was a sporting interest, an interest in education, or whatever it was. And I didn't feel that the Minority Front, as a party representing Indians, would have a place in the new dispensation. And I think history has shown that over the years, now 30 years down into democracy, that there is need to belong to political parties that are broad-based, that would look at the interests of broad South Africans. Although of late, what I have noticed is that there is a tendency amongst some communities to go back to the days before pre-1994. And perhaps, there's reason for them to say that pre-1994, things were done for them. Post-1994, they are a forgotten community. And I can say that about the Indian community to some extent, because, I've had discussions with the presidents of with Jacob Zuma, with Ramaphosa and everybody else to impress upon them that if you're looking at needs of people, don't only look at a select community or a race-based community. Look at the needs of everybody. The person in Chatsworth who's living in an overcrowded house, if he's Indian, still requires a house somewhere else. And if there's a government-sponsored house, why shouldn't that person or that family benefit? Now, it would seem that when it comes to housing and schools and other facilities, it's directed towards a particular community, which I don't mind, because the majority have to benefit from what the new political dispensation has brought us. But I think there needs to come a time when this current government needs to look at people as people and look at the needs of people as the needs of people, rather than the needs of Indian, colored, white, or whatever your race group is, or black, African black.
Because apartheid in race has not been eliminated. And therefore we believe that it is significant and important that minorities have their own voice in parliament. What do we say? Talk to the majority parties.
Firstly, it's a myth, that you can get everyone together. Because if you look at the world today, not only South Africa, the world, there is diversity. What we aim for is unity in diversity. He did not alienate the Indian community from the rest of the country. He did not do that. But he focused on the needs of the Indian community, because the Indian community had lots of needs. And even today, the truth of the matter is that the minorities are being sidelined. And that's a fact.
Mr. Rajbansi had created a consciousness within the politics of this country, especially within the ANC, within the IFP, and within the DA, where these parties would be careful. I can tell you now, the new policy, the workplace policy, which aims to appoint people based on their color and not their abilities and skills. This would not have seen the light of day if Mr. Rajbansi was around. He would have fought that tooth and nail. And these political parties would be very much aware of the voice of Mr. Rajbansi. And that is what is missing right now. So at the time when the Minority Front was at its height, remember, there was a time when the Minority Front's support had actually increased tenfold. Because the Indian community then started moving away from the DA, and they said, well, we need to have a voice. And so it did serve its purpose, yes, and I believe it did a fantastic job of it as well.
When he started the Minority Front, he taught so many individuals and councillors to be at the best in whatever they did. So there are many, I can mention names, of councillors that learned under him. They've climbed up higher steps. And it is sad that I have to say that many of the male councillors have actually gone on their own. It's not because of any other reason, but I think they have learned so much from Mr. Rajbansi that they felt that the muscle that came out of the education through Mr. Rajbansi was basically strong enough for them to move on.
As a result of the pressure from the minority front, ministries, departments, quasi-state political institutions have made changes in respect of the continued employment of Indians. But of course we have a political party in our midst that pretends to be changing. They hoodwinked South African Indians to vote for them on the 2nd of June 1999. And seated in these benches are the members of the Democratic Party who are mainly white. They won 7 seats in this province, Mr. Speaker. There is not a single Indian MP of the Democratic Party in KwaZulu-Natal. That's a shame. That's a betrayal. And that's a sellout. And this is what the minority front is highlighting today in this provincial chamber.
I think it was more a case of, don't just talk the talk, walk the talk. I think he didn't just brand himself with cheap marketing to try and get votes. He drove those words home by participating in whatever it is he said he was doing. I mean, there's always, like I said, there's always going to be haters. Some of his councillors might have loved to hate him type of thing, but then that's how you would run a party. You need to be hard and you need to be able to make decisions that don't make everybody happy. So he was the kind of leader that led on the basis that action was required. It's not about just talking. Let's walk that talk, let's make it happen. I've seen that firsthand. I mean, he was at every function. He was there, he was saying what he needed to say. Often he'd put adverts saying certain things and he would drive that home by acting on it. He'd make sure his councillors were seen and heard and were doing what the community wanted. One of the reasons he was so successful is because of that. It's like you get political parties all the time coming up. A lot of them tell you what you want to hear. When the time comes, they're not there to do what they're supposed to do, and then you lose faith in it. He had a very strong following, and I think the MF was basically successful because of him in the leadership process.
When he did his manifesto launches and he walked in with the tiger the one day, we were fascinated, absolutely fascinated, that this man can walk in with a tiger, because he was the tiger.
With a purpose to participate within the true principles of democracy, the Minority Front wants not only to receive benefits from South Africa, but to work for them.
For him, he always wanted to ensure that Indian people were protected to a level where they were comfortable, wherever they were. Which means that he understood the ethos of the Indian community, that they were a vulnerable community. And the only thing that made them feel comfortable was stability. And that means stability in jobs, in a home, a roof above their head, food on their table, good education for their children, safety, and political acceptance, So for him, those were very important things about the way he thought about the Indian community. And they're in a quest for always wanting to be prosperous and to see everyone else prosperous. So for him, these were very important things. Even the culture, language, everything that came with being Indian, he appreciated. And he always wanted those things promoted, protected, showcased. That was who he was.
Our forefathers came here in 1860. We are the product of the dreams. They are our great pioneers. They took a bold step forward fearlessly. Are you the new pioneers? Vote for the Tiger. Vote MF. All the way.
You know, I think as a representative of the minority, being Indian, he most certainly wanted to edge forward for the Indian community. You look at the areas, Phoenix, Chatsworth, Reservoir Hills, and the surrounds. I mean, he mainly and mostly worked in these townships, the Indian townships. So I think he most certainly wanted to make certain that the Indians were not sidelined.
You know, I like to quote Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, a very great Prime Minister of India. And in one of his speeches he said, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny. And now we have come to redeem that pledge.
We have been together for a long time. And he has got excellent qualities of leadership. And I'm happy I came here in order to acknowledge these qualities of leadership that he has.
And Mandela was very keen to get closer to Mr. Rajbansi, and that's what I was asked to help with fostering a relationship. And he was someone that knew PR. In fact, when I look at today, when I look at Julius Malema, it reminds me of him. Julius Malema is a master tactician in PR, and so was Mr. Rajbansi. And he told me once, he said, no matter what it is, as long as you're in news, good or bad, people will remember you.
Those of us that were in the ANC at the time were saying, well, Madiba, how can you choose this man? He was a sellout, he was a puppet of the white government, etc., etc. And then it slowly began to dawn on us that if you want inclusive politics, you take everybody along with you. And so the House of Delegates politicians were also taken along with them. There are still some people who were served in the House of Delegates serving in our national government today. So we can't make bone of one and fish of the other or flesh of the other.
He never called him Rajbansi, Mr. Mandela. His name is Amichand Rajbansi. Yeah? Mr. Mandela will say, how are you, Amichand? I still remember that.
When Madiba came to our home, he came to thank Mr. Rajbansi. He came to thank him for his contributions. And he said it in just a few words that he simply wanted to thank him for his contributions towards the political landscape and how it shaped up.
And when I think of that meeting that he had with Madiba at his home in Chatsworth, I mean, that was a remarkable event, and it was a masterstroke that at a time when Madiba was being advised by anti-apartheid activists in Chatsworth to put distance with this man called Rajbansi, there was Madiba saying, would you rather that we have him close to us in the ANC or surrender him to the opposition? And Rajbansi knew that he was needed more by the ANC than he might have needed the ANC. And he played that so well. And if you have a remarkable personality like Mandela sitting at your table, you know, that brings you huge political credentials. And he milked that to, you know, every single aspect of that, he milked that to his benefit.
Just stand here. Stand here. Yeah? Animal. I say Mani. His surname Mani. Madiba.
Amichand Mandela visited his home to have lunch. The very high lunch they had, where my daughter Rina cooked. And we all sat around the table with our wonderful Nelson Mandela, and we had nice lunch. And I want to say I was given the opportunity in presenting our late Nelson Mandela with a swastika, which would have got there.
So Madiba was the hero and Mr. Rajbansi was the villain in the early 80s, in my world. And yet, in Mr. Mandela going to visit him at home, it was almost, it went full circle. And to realize that actually, how wrong we were when we were younger.
So they had lunch. And in particular, what I recall from the speech that was given by Madiba himself was that here is a man who has excellent qualities for leadership.
I'm grateful to visit the home of Amichand. I have traveled this long and difficult road to freedom, but I have discovered the secret that when you cross a great hill, you only discover that there are more hills to climb. I have taken a rest here for a moment to steal a view on the glorious vista that's around you.
Never again will this country see that oppression. And we must say, never must we forget that God gave us this opportunity of a person like Madiba to walk the surface of the earth.
And I think that was Rajbansi's legacy, to have this rainbow nation together. I remember when he was in hospital, John Steenhuisen and I went together to visit him, and he brought this fluffy toy of a Bengal tiger to give him. And it showed that he was able to even get the opposition together. And I think that is the legacy we need in this country, that there has to be unity in diversity, there has to be social cohesion, and we all need to coexist without conflict and coexist peacefully, so that together we can move this country forward. And he was always an optimist. He always believed in a brighter future. And he never ever gave up on anything. You know, he was determination personified. If he felt that something had to be done, he did it. And did it through hard work. And I think the legacy he left behind was this, that we must continue to move forward and not, we have to live in the moment and look at the future and have faith and hope in the future. And more importantly, have faith and belief in ourselves.
That question Madiba asked me, what is inside you that makes you tick? What is inside you that makes you survive? It's a Daily News that wrote that Raj is the greatest survivor. He keeps bouncing back. You know, I tell people that when you see a bad day coming, compare it to a storm. Just stand on the pavement, the storm will go past, the cloud is clear, you take full control. But I'm really thankful to everybody, but tonight I want to thank the Almighty. The secret of my success I know. It will be revealed in my book. The reason why I'm not revealing it, because there are 500 people tonight. I know that 500 copies of my books will be sold straight away.
I think the other thing about Mr. Rajbansi, where I had the opportunity of meeting Nelson Mandela at his home. Now his home is confined to space. It's confined, you know his home right here in Narenda Park. It's very small, but Mr. Rajbansi made certain I was included in that. And that's the way, and that's when I met the late Nelson Mandela. And I'm so glad that through him, I was able to do that. I think that in some way became a highlight of my life, and all thanks to Mr. Rajbansi for that.
He sold the Indians out. He sold the Indians out to join the ANC. But then they want that one seat, so they gave him that one minister's post, you know. So he didn't mind about that because he came back to the people. The people didn't realize that with that post, he can help them. You see, he can really help them. You see, he always, you know what his words were? We got one foot in the door. We have to put our whole leg there.
What is our stance as an MF with the ANC? Our stance was, we don't sell our votes. We will work with the ruling party. By working with the ruling party, as MF, whatever we put forward to the council, whether it's the motions or whatever it is, it will be recognized by the ANC. With that, we agreed, and Raj and Charmaine, they voted in with the ANC, and he became the Minister of Arts and Culture.
I did a cartoon where the Indian vote was being given to the ANC, okay, on a plate. Rajbansi took the Indian vote, the Indian people are giving the votes. I did that cartoon, it was very narrative. He took the plate and he gave it to the ANC and he became Minister of Sport. Now in the same week, the post came up on a Wednesday. Rajbansi got very angry because I took the show. I showed him taking the Indian vote and giving it to the ANC.
Let me be honest and tell you, I also thought he was a sellout at the time. That was the politics of the day. And that is what we thought. Except as we go along into our democracy, we realize that we need him now more than ever before. At the type of personality, the type of politics he spoke about, the type of politics he wanted ingrained in our constitution and in our parliament. He spoke up for our community. There are very few leaders, if not any at all, that speak on our behalf anymore.
Those relationships were possible because with Mr. Rajbansi, you knew what you'd get. Mr. Rajbansi was not this today, and next week is something else. So, and he will, in terms of strategy, you know what he's saying. In terms of tactics and whose interest he's fighting for, he comes up front. These are the interests that I'm fighting for, and if I don't speak for these, who else is speaking for them?
And I remember when it was a critical voting factor, when that one vote of his would have made a big difference to the constitution of KZN, especially relating to the royal family. And he decided at Mandela's behest to support the ANC in the vote, and ANC won that debate and the voting, and the constitution was not changed. And for that, I would say I really admired him because he did the right thing. He did the thing for the better of the people of KZN.
And all what we are asking you is not to support the stooges, not to support the stooges who are ganging up with whites to go back to apartheid. You work with the African majority. You live with the African majority. You play with the African majority. And all what we're saying, don't end the rot. Don't alienate them. You have only one of two choices. Either team up with a person called Tony Leon and Martinez on one side. On the other hand, be part of a political movement that represents true non-racialism and true democracy.
The choices he made changed, for instance, the profile of KwaZulu-Natal. Had his one vote not been given to the ANC might never have been in power in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. So I think he was masterful at reading political dynamics. He had particular ideas in mind where he wanted to see, particularly the community of Indian origin, go politically. And he read that, and he made his choices in that vein. Now, there will be anti-apartheid activists, for instance, who would consider him a real nemesis. Some would say that he even destroyed their lives. On the other hand, there are people in the community who will argue that had it not been for him, there may have been so much that the Indian community might have missed out on altogether, whether it's schools, sporting facilities, or indeed prominence in politics. And he brought a real prominence to the Indian community on the political spectrum.
He lived up to the adage, or the nickname of being the Bengal Tiger, because his roar will never ever fade, irrespective of the time frames. Because when one goes to functions and when issues affecting the Indian community come up, the name Rajbansi becomes synonymous with that. So I think he will always be remembered for the valiant fights that he put up on behalf of the community. Again, there will be those who will vehemently disagree and label him a sellout. But he again chose the path that he believed would reach the ultimate nirvana.
They ran this propaganda that said that the MF sold your votes. And because of that narrative that they peddled, people then labeled Rajbansi a sellout again. During the apartheid era, the House of Delegates, Rajbansi was called a sellout because he joined the system. While there were groups outside that was opposing the apartheid system, he said he can fight apartheid from joining the system. They called him a sellout then. After the elections, Rajbansi chose, and it wasn't a coalition with the ANC. It was a decision to say, let's work together for the benefit of the Indian community.
And he built a lot of stadium where they had no stadium at all.
As Indians, the seniors had nothing. There was no fun walk. There was no sports for the seniors. There was no money whatsoever for the seniors. But when he became the Minister of Sports, every year we had massive functions. And it's the first time that I know that where the community, where the old people started respecting sports. They didn't realize that sports was so important to them because they never had it.
And yes, sport is supposed to unite, not when there's sports quotas, where you exclude people because of race. And there's no merit in sport either. But yes, he did try. And you know, the most you can do these days is try, especially when you're up against the groundswell of opposition and, you know, racism. You keep trying. And he tried. And, you know, that's where you respect them. And he tried, whereas, and I want to emphasize, other people sit on the sidelines and complain and complain and complain and do nothing to change anything.
He used that position to try to develop KwaZulu-Natal as a sporting province. That you've got soccer, start shining in that. Let's get townships to be playing soccer. Let's get the schools playing into soccer. We never succeeded much into that, but we need to go back because part of the glory of the past was that sports was based on the schools. You go to the United States today, it's based on the schools. Any country, this sports is based on the school because that's where you have got your young people. And if you neglect the schools, school sport, where else are you going to get those young people?
He realized that if we want to promote sports, if you want to produce world-class sports personalities, we start at school level, right? And as I used to drive around with him, you know, in Chatsworth, we used to see school grounds empty after school hours, classrooms empty. A lot of money was paid to put up those buildings. Weekends, school grounds empty. Where at that time there were Model C schools amongst the whites, which were used optimally, even on weekends. Like you go to Westville Boys, they have a cricket stadium. They send the children to Australia for cricket camps. But the Indian schools had nothing. But we had the facilities, but the people were not using it. So he then formed a committee. He was fortunate also, he had a very good hero department. If I remember correctly, it was Somaya Khan. So he formed a special team of sports people, because at that time sports was in the school curriculum. He got the best of them together. He got them together and they were mandated to go to school and start sports activities among the children. That is where you start. You start at an early age.
You can talk about sports field called courts, which is the combination of soccer. You can play football, you can play basketball, and so on. So all is incorporated into that sports field. Raj must have built about 50 from nothing. He had a budget. He made it a point that there was no stealing in the process. Whatever money that was allocated to the rural areas was going down to those sports fields. And whenever he went to launch the project, he would call in the councillors to be deeply involved. He will call the members of parliament to say, I want you to supervise the activities that are taking place in this facility that we are handing over to the community. I respect him for that.
Mr. Rajbansi was meticulous, and like I said, he was very strict about how he ran things. Like, I mean, you can't enter his office without a coat and a tie if you're a male. And if you enter his office without, I mean, besides his visitors, but I'm talking about staff members in the ministry or other members in the department, please get out.
Rural development, Raj took that one head on in terms of the challenges. Whether you talk about Chatsworth, you talk about Phoenix, he improved a lot for the people that are poor out there.
Mr. Minister, we thank you for your guidance in steering this new ship, the Department of Sport and Recreation. I'm certain no other department has a hands-on minister like you are to us, not only as the political head, but also as a patriarch. The portfolio has given us an opportunity to also experience and share your passion for the upliftment of communities at grassroots levels and of your extreme care and concern for the poor and the downtrodden.
Yes, he was responsible for the stadium here in Chatsworth, which is a big plus to this day. It's so well utilized by the local community. But going on to the Black Township, when he was the Minister of Sport, he most certainly then drove to stadiums in other townships.
I think his biggest disappointment was when he wasn't given a second term as a minister, notwithstanding the fact that he was named the best performing minister as the first sports minister of KZN by the National Department of Sports. And so when he didn't get that second appointment to the cabinet, just based on merit and his performance, he was hurt, very hurt.
With respect, I don't think he polarized the community. There were just so many people with pushing their own personal agendas. If you look at the ANC, the people there were simply to benefit for themselves. They've done nothing for the specifically Indian community. And there's nothing wrong with Indians having human rights and being protected from any sort of oppression. And even now, when you speak out in favor of the Indian community for equality, it's still a problem.
I'm prepared to be called a sellout in the cause of the duty of the masses of South Africa. As long as I am not a sellout of Lenin from the grave.
I don't think he was misunderstood. He was somewhere on the spectrum between caring and contradiction. And if we look at history, there's the right side of history and there's the wrong side of history. And there's all that space in between. And I would place him in that space in between because he made particular choices at particular moments in time. And I think he was well-meaning in terms of what he wanted where he located himself in terms of the needs of his particular community. Now, in the polarized politics that we were, there was the anti-apartheid struggle on the one side, and there was collaboration within apartheid structures on the other. And the people who made those choices, I have no doubt, thought through those carefully. They were not necessarily opportunistic, but it was the particular moments in history, and we must always interpret people within those moments in history.
To a certain extent, tonight was my induction. I've been to an Indian home before, but I've never been to a large party like this. The differences I could enumerate, but there are also similarities. Also in our culture, the longer the bar keeps open, the rowdier the crowd gets.
And I think that as much as Mr. Rajbansi was vilified, was criticized no end for using the tricameral parliament to hopefully better the lives of the Indian community, he did that to the best of his ability along with his team. So yes, while there will be those who will be critical up till now of the role that he played, let's flip the coin and look at the other side. If it wasn't for the noises that he and the team in the House of Delegates made over certain issues like housing and education per se, I do not believe for one moment that the Indian community would have benefited at that time and thereafter to the progress that subsequently arose out of those interventions.
When South Africa became a democratic country, there were just only 11 official languages, which deprived many other religions and organizations not to be part as an acceptable language in South Africa. Mr. Rajbansi was one behind the negotiations and making sure that everybody had a part to say and be part of South Africa. I'm proud to say that from the first, when we had 11 official languages, we now have 23 official languages. And Mr. Rajbansi was the man who had negotiated on behalf of many that were left out.
And a lot of people, they said that he should bribe the people with the biryani. Yeah.
But Mr. Rajbansi had something else in him, you know. If he headed a function, or let's say we had a sports day for the seniors, he would never ever order food from anyone. Never. He will get the cooks, he will get the staff, he will make sure there's 10 daksas of food there, the veg must be fresh, the ladies must come a day earlier, everything must be clean. He will come a day earlier to say, is everything prepared? Is there anything else we're short of? Must we get anything more? Everything must be freshly remade. That biryani must be freshly made. His biryani was the thing. Everybody must eat biryani. And then when it's left over, he would put it into containers. Ma, don't go empty. Take some biryani and go. That was Rajbansi.
I know generally the senior citizens loved him because he was always visible at their functions. They would always invite him, and he was always ready to take time from his busy schedules to be a part, of those activities. And then, because he used to go to have these functions and meet and have these campaigns in all of the areas, he always felt that it was good to have a meal. And then it had to be something nourishing, not just serving them cold drinks. And at the back of his mind, obviously, it had to be traditional. And what other traditional meal to serve our communities, irrespective of where you were, than the biryani. And I can assure you that those biryanis were very tasty, and people loved it. And it wasn't only for the biryani that they would come there. They loved being with him. But the cherry on the top was that they would be treated to biryani and sometimes soji.
Contemporary equivalent of the biryani is the streetwise 2. You give people a t-shirt and a streetwise 2 and they'll fill up a stadium for you. I don't see anything wrong with the the biryani politics. You called people out, you had to feed them. And every political party has gone out to create this silly thing called food hampers, and you bring people a food hamper at Christmas and you think you're feeding them for the whole year. I can tell you this much, there was hardly an event that Rajbansi hosted where he didn't feed people biryani or bring them some amazing entertainment. I've never seen anybody take Nagara dancers and make them a political weapon in the manner that he did. So he was quite phenomenal in that regard.
Anyone coming to visit anyone's home, the first thing that will be done is to offer them something, whether it's tea, whether it's a cold drink, whether it's a meal. I mean, somebody coming to your home, you will insist that they have something to eat before leaving. That is our tradition. That is a part of our culture. So I think some have learned quite quickly that the way to a person's heart is through his stomach.
Well, you know, that is even today. I mean, he is remembered by biryani, you know, and you hear lots of comedians actually doing that. And you know, I think Mr. Rajbansi, and I must say this, he is one of the most imitated, if I can say that, people when it comes to comedy. And that's where, as I said, he wasn't somebody who shied about it. He wasn't embarrassed. He actually embraced it. It worked.
Yeah, I think nowadays it's not biryani. People want more substantial meals if you need their vote. But you know, and in those days, whenever you needed a vote, you had to have a function and you had to provide biryani. And I think Mr. Rajbansi was the king of, you know, ensuring that biryani was given to people. And he knew also, you know, how to bring in your chutney nagara and all those kinds of music. He did things to please the local community. And of course, that was his focus.
Rajbansi loved the nagaras. He loved it. Whenever we have a get-together, we'll have a nagara. People will be dancing. They will sing about the Minority Front. They will uplift the name of Minority Front. You'll find that people coming with biryanis to enjoy the entertainment done by Mr. Rajbansi and Mrs. Rajbansi. That's where the biryani all started. We never have any get-together without biryani being said to us.
Now, and in the recent past, you'll see more and more and more. Maybe they've taught the political parties, he has taught the political parties a lesson as to how and what it takes. It wasn't about the biryani. I think what it was that he wanted to feed people. If people came to support him, rallied around him, if you invite somebody at your home, you want to make certain that, you know, you would feed them before they leave. And that's the Indian sort of tradition. It wasn't at random that he's going out to black townships and Indian townships just to go and get a vote that he would feed them. If he had a rally, if he had a gathering at a hall, then he would do that. And I, you know, I don't see anything wrong in that. You and I would do it if we were in that. But again, so rightfully said, I think many other political parties have taken off from that. Maybe not in the form of biryanis, I mean giving people biryani, but whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's a cap, what difference does it make? It's the same thing.
Yeah, you know, I think what he did, and sometimes I tease my colleagues in ANC, he introduced what we call the biryani politics. He was the first politician that made sure that people are fed biryani, and it was, our ANC colleagues saw that and they found it was a good idea and they started doing the same thing. So he was someone that just knew how to get votes. He was someone that knew how to get people endeared to him.
Mr. Rajbansi would put in adverts in the local newspapers, right? Totally nonsensical. Now, I was an educated person. I would look at these adverts, I'd look at some of the letters that he would write, and I'd tell him, I'd say, please, this is embarrassing, you know, for you to go and put these things. He'll say, no. Leave it, just leave it. You know, his letters, although they were in a conversational type of tone with a number of grammatical errors and all that, they still had a reach that the professional adverts never had. He had this ability where he could speak to the common man and he could speak to presidents and professors at the same time, and they would understand him.
If you had to give him a score out of 1 to 10, he'd probably exceed that score. You know, there's no mentioning how good he was in terms of marketing. Nanda, the world-famous cartoonist, said he was probably the most colorful politician you'd get, and he did a lot of cartoon work on him.
The milk carnival, for example, was a good example of that. He wanted maximum coverage for that, and he did not hesitate to visit our newspaper and other newspapers at the time to so-called milk the maximum coverage for that event. So yes, he definitely had the art of marketing.
The one thing he definitely believed in was the only bad publicity was no publicity. I still remember very well, we were at a function in Newcastle and the James Commission play was on. And rather than sit in the corner quietly and just hope people don't notice anything, he walked in, he marched down the hall, got on the stage and greeted everybody. And I mean, that for me was the essence of who he was. He was not going to apologize for what he had done. He was not going to apologize for who he was. He believed in what he was doing. He believed in himself and he backed himself.
Even before the Milk Carnival, I think the Milk Carnival actually took it to another level. But he really, he could just sell anything to anybody. Because two things, he knew what he was talking about. So he wasn't actually just selling you this thing to buy it. He knew the product. When he was selling it to you, he knew the product. He knew what he was selling to you. He knew what the people of Chatsworth could do. He knew what the community could do, knew what the Indian people were worth. And he was selling that to the entire South Africa. And then eventually, of course, it was sold to the world.
You say, Paulos, next week there will be another issue that people will be concerned about. Don't worry about this one. Whatever you see, whether it's bad publicity, but who's talking about Raj? People are talking about Raj. Whether the article is positive or negative, but people are talking about Raj. But next week, they'll forget about it.
He had probably more of a relationship with the media than probably any other politician I can think of. And he was a marketing genius when it comes to doing his ads and creating them and how he wanted them. He was very particular.
There is no doubt he was an absolutely media genius, and he could be equated to Julius Malema, who is an absolute master at media relationships. And at times, with the media, he would say things, controversial things, and he will create controversy to make sure he gets into the news. And that takes a very special sort of person.
No matter what people say about you, positive or negative, take advantage of that, because that becomes marketing for you. That puts you out there. That makes you known out there. You don't want to always glorify people. Something negative, so we've, of course, as I said, through our media, we've carried negative in the past about him. But he'll use it to his advantage. Very clever. People sometimes get uptight when something negative is said about them. But guess what? Sometimes there's more followers when there's a negative story going out there than a positive story.
Indians feel marginalized, and they are marginalized. They are leaving this country. I mean, you take a policy in Mahatma Gandhi Hospital. Our nurses are going to Dubai when the policy is to employ local people, but you're getting nurses from Transkei and giving them jobs. When the human resource manager of that hospital tells Indian staff, you got no future in my hospital.
His legacy will live on. His name is synonymous to Bengal Tiger. He was a giant at that time in the political. And the most important statement I would say about him, he was the voice of the Indian people.
One of the greatest legacy that he left behind was to to tell the Indians that we have come here for a purpose and don't be afraid. He was never ever afraid, from the airport to the harbor to anywhere where we were not treated right. Mr. Rajbansi got it right for us.
My personal view, and I think many Indians now in 2023 realize that he made an immense contribution to the Indian community. And as the country deteriorates around us and South Africa has become this collapsed state, suddenly people now realize what value he gave to the Indian community. It's a bit late, but I think people realize late what somebody has contributed to their growth. If you look at the schools we have under House of Delegates, it had one of the highest standards of education. The hospitals worked, the areas were clean, the municipalities worked, everything worked well. And now it's collapsed. And that's something we have to admit, that we are in the throes of a collapsed state. And we have yet to see somebody else who will take that stance, who will fight for minority rights and demand equality for Indian children.
Today, affirmative action and quotas have become controversial issues, where it remains positive discrimination to the already advantaged, previously disadvantaged majority.
Today we have a plethora of small Indian community political parties, and they can't seem to galvanize the community in the way that he did. And that is that special chutzpah that he had that makes him the type of politician that we need today.
Raj, he was a man amongst men. In fact, you can't equate that man to anybody else. And might I just throw this in over here? I think one of the greatest Indian politicians we have had was Rajbansi. Rajbansi will stand out as number one, as number two, and as number three.
Well, I would be very hesitant to paint a halo over Mr. Rajbansi's head. I think that he was a formidable political personality. He's somebody who came into the political juncture at a time where politics was fraught in South Africa. And the choices he made right from the 1970s through the heyday of the resistance to apartheid in the 1980s and then in the 1990s, we see different aspects of his political persona, because he chose to be part of a system in the 70s and 80s, but he was remarkably adept at reinventing himself in the 1990s. And I don't think that the democratic process would have had the same kind of trajectory had he not been part of it, particularly from the perspective of the Indian community.
And in all my letter writing, I refer to him as a modern-day Mahatma Gandhi.
I think it was just him being the flamboyant person that he was, that whatever he said and did made news.
Problem is, and I think the legacy he leaves is far beyond what we would assume his legacy to be. Most people would say, oh, well, the Indian community, the Indian community, the Indian community. But he built stadiums all over. He extended and established infrastructure for sport in KZN that outlasted him.
What Raj has done for the people of South Africa will never go away, will never die away. His legacy will carry on. Mandela has visited Rajbansi's place in Chatsworth. We had a big get-together, and he told Raj, you are the man for the people. Your legacy will never die off.
Tenacious fighter who took his responsibility very seriously in terms of not only trying to uplift the Indian community at that time in the social arena, but the social, economic, and political arena. And I think he used whatever means was available to him at that time, together with colleagues. Of course, he was a leader of a political party, and he had many, many other colleagues that worked with him. And I think all of them used the system, albeit that the system was not perfect because it did not represent the majority of South Africans. But I think at that moment in time, and given the way the apartheid government functioned, they seized the opportunity to do what best they could for the community that they represented.
The democratic values, Raj used to respect that. The respect of the constituencies where you come from, that don't disappear for 5 years, and then people will only see you when you are calling upon them to vote again for you for another 5 years. That was not Raj. Raj will attend to details, to small things in those areas. Take up issues of people of a mama that is complaining about the rates. You're saying, Raj, you are the MEC. How can you be talking about a mama that is having an issue with the city about the rates, about the land, the site, and so on? That was Raj.
When we talk of peace, we shed tears because I've been putting peace pillars all over, and Mr. Rajbansi at that time unveiled one peace pillar together with Winnie Madikizela Mandela and Mangosuthu Buthelezi at the Clare Estate Crematorium, the 2010 World Cup that was taking place in Durban. And at that very event, I mean, you constantly hear his contribution and all what he spoke of, and Winnie Madikizela Mandela and Mangosuthu Buthelezi bear testament of his contribution, and they commented at that time, at that very event, that without Mr. Amichand Rajbansi, we would not achieve peace in this province of KwaZulu-Natal.
You know, when I first met Winnie Madikizela Mandela, it was at the opening of the Black Rock Casino in Newcastle. And I remember there was a group and we were gonna have dinner together. But before settling down, she was introducing Mr. Rajbansi to other ANC people. And one of them was the then Premier of Gauteng, Tokyo Sekwale. And I remember very clearly, she said, meet the Raj, the tiger himself. She said, this is the man that went right into the lion's den. And he broke the apartheid system from within.
In the corridors of power, while we celebrate 10 years of liberation, it coincides with the 10 years of service the Minority Front has given to the people of South Africa. Therefore, we felt it was appropriate that in our final election campaign in Phoenix, we celebrate the birthday. And we celebrate it with you.
His demise was a big loss to his political party, and I think largely to the Indian community, because he is someone that stood up. And I remember there's a famous picture of him in the airport telling off a police officer in his normal pointing finger, telling this person where to get off because he was harassing members of the Indian community. And everyone knows about the World Trade Fair, where he took on the AWB. And it was brave enough. And these are the actions. Yes, he was a brave politician, a man that I believe a lot of people respected. President Mandela respected him, and a man who at times was controversial. And though his politics deferred to a lot of people, no one can put him down for his commitment to whatever he did. He was a leader, a political leader that I believe there's very few people currently that come near him.
The schools that he built, the quality of schools, lots of people learned from him what a school should provide, the facilities, the educational facilities.
This man had his heart in the right place. He worried about every individual. It wasn't because you supported him or didn't support him that he worried about you. He was interested in everyone. And I know that because whenever we went out with him, wherever we went, he would stop and talk to kids and stop and talk to the older people. What I want people to know is that you cannot just, build a picture of Rajbansi that's painted by media and political parties and political opponents. The picture of Rajbansi has to be the man Rajbansi. He was dynamic, but the most importantly, he was a fatherly person. He cared about everyone else. Even the cleaner, I remember he didn't know the cleaner in our offices, and she only told me like a few months later, he gives me an extra money every month so that I can buy things for my 2 sons in school. He won't tell anyone that kind of thing. Those are things he never did. You've got to know that this man had his heart in the right place.
I'm just hoping in some way that he's acknowledged more than he has been. I mean, I know he's passed on, but in some way, you know, there's streets, there's stadiums, there's places that are named after an individual for the contribution. Rajbansi has done so much in these communities. If anything, what I'd like to see as far as a legacy for him is that like a stadium in Chatsworth, which he was instrumental about, that they named that stadium after him.
You know, he was a very strong devotee of Lord Hanuman, and encompassing all of the values of the Mahavir, he was trying to teach a lot of people to be fearless. You can only do well for your country if you're fearless, you know. You also had to have the power. Irrespective of what your levels of ability is, there may be so much of potential within you that you need to be able to identify that. So he mentored in that aspect.
He was a voice for the Indian minority community in this country. That was his legacy.
He has always told me that we must never let people down. And for that reason, we must always trust people. Trust them to that extent until they let you down. Because he said you won't last in politics if you didn't put trust in everybody that you met. So you trust, you give trust, and only if someone lets you down, it's better that way.
You'll find us in the grounds. You'll find us in the churches, temples, and the mosque, whether there is election or no election. But don't fall for the taxes of stooges who are writing letters and putting the signatures to letters that are drafted by whites who want to preserve white superiority. The DP says merit, and in their eyes, merit means white mainly or white only.
Attention, everybody. This is A. Rajbansi of the Minority Front. Tomorrow in the Ward 73 by-elections, say no to the party hoppers. The Minority Front is your only trump card. Reject the latest tricks. Reject the SMSs. The Wednesday's housing meeting is another bluff and is cancelled. Your only hope is voting for Anandan Naidu of the Minority Front. The Minority Front is your only trump card. Tomorrow say a big no. The Minority Front is your only trump card. The Tiger's man is your only hope. Watch for the Tiger on the ballot paper and put your cross next to it.